Hello everyone and welcome to the next edition of the Chartered Career Chat series. My name is Sinead Fox-Hamilton and today I am joined by Chartered Accountant member Jason McIntosh. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Not so bad, Sinead. How are you?
I am keeping the very best and I'm delighted you've come on to share your career story. So why don't we rewind? Would you talk us through how did you get into the chartered profession? Where did it all begin?
Sure. I guess it sort of started before university because I considered accountancy as a career and I went a slightly different route and I decided to study law at Queen's. I wanted to do the law and accountancy course and unfortunately they pulled that the year that I was going to Queen's. So I went for law, ended up in accountancy, so it all worked out okay in the end. But I studied law and I found myself more interested, to be honest, in the business type side of things. And then that sort of led me down the route of I wasn't entirely sure when I graduated what is it I want to do. So I went back to Queen's and studied a master's in corporate governance. And at that point, I thought, yeah, that's the sort of angle that I want to go with my career. And during that time, I did a lot of research into accountancy, and it was really in the back of my mind. So I thought I'll have a look and see what it's about. And I mean, the institute have always been very good at sharing materials in terms of what a career as a chartered accountant means, and I found a lot of that stuff as I was trying to research what I wanted to do with my career. So yeah, I found that just after I graduated and joined Deloitte on a training contract in 2011, which feels like a long time ago actually now. It probably is a long time ago for maybe some of the student members. So yeah, I joined Deloitte as a trainee in 2011 in the audit department, and progressed through my training there. So 3 years of exams, obviously doing law, no exemptions, 3 full years of exams. So a baptism of fire. But to be honest, I found doing Cap 1, Cap 2 and FAE, you got a really good grounding, by having to do all 3 sets of exams. I can say that now, having done them. At the time, it was slightly more, wow, 3 full years whenever some of my colleagues only had 1 set to do, or 2 sets maybe. So yeah, I trained at Deloitte, stayed in audit ultimately for about 6.5 years then. Yeah, as I say, it was the institute that really caught my attention in terms of accountancy as a career. So yeah, so far so good.
So far so good. A bit similar that I did law as well, Jason. Yeah. So I understand a lot of that sentiment. Is it fair to say when you were back at school then it wasn't like there's a myth there that you have to come through and you have to have studied maths or accounts at A level? Did you study any of those subjects, or what subjects did you study?
Yeah, I did. I studied maths at A level, and to be honest, that was what made me think about accountancy at that stage, because I really enjoyed maths and I found it was something that I was relatively good at. So I thought, I think sometimes when people say it's like, right, good at maths, accountancy is a good career. Actually, it's so much more than that, actually, of course. But yeah, because I studied maths and was good at maths, that's where I found myself looking. But yeah, I also had the interest in law and sort of went that direction. So yeah, in saying that though, Sinead, obviously I know a lot of people that have qualified as a chartered accountant that have had no interest in maths and gave it up at GCSE level and didn't study it, and
I'm guilty.
Yeah, but it's so much more than the numbers, isn't it? So.
Absolutely. I think what the way I try to break it down sometimes to the young folk considering the pathway is, yes, you need a numerical aptitude, but you don't need to be a mathematician. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's 100% the way I would put it. You put it much more articulately than I would have managed, but that's...
Oh no, not at all. But it's interesting just the pathways into the profession. As you say, yes, you had maths, but then went on to law, went on to a master's corporate governance, and then obviously into a training position. So you've walked us through up to obviously post-qualification, still working in audit. I know you're out working in industry now. Can you tell us a bit about the transition then into business?
Yeah, sure. So I was in practice for, I think, about 6.5 years. So I went through and ended up as a manager in audit, and I did a couple of secondments and things. And I found myself interested in the business side of things more, to be honest, more than I thought that I would. When I first started training, I didn't think it was for me. And actually, the more that I explored it, the more I thought, this is quite interesting. And then one day an opportunity came up in a company called Seagate, back in the Northwest, which is where I'm from and born, raised, and now back living. So when that opportunity came up, and I had already been thinking about working a business and I'd done a little bit of secondment experience in business, I thought, yeah, that's sounds like the right time for me to try it, and it sounds like the right opportunity for me. So yeah, I moved into business, and I found the transition okay. To be perfectly honest, I found it okay. Some people say it's a challenge. To be honest, I think having worked in practice and having worked especially in audit gave me a really good grounding to understand the aspects of the business that I was going into work in. You know, the role that I took on originally was preparing the financial statements and doing a lot of that accounting type stuff. So quite similar, and I was lucky in that regard. But I found the transition really good. I found the aspect of going to the same place for work every day probably the strangest thing about it, because obviously being an audit, you were out and about all the time, and then it was like, right, this is your desk, and that's where you stay, you know. So pros and cons to that, I think. You know, you miss getting out and about, but sure, we're now all stuck at home as well, so there's no such thing as.
We're all in our houses at this stage.
Yeah, exactly.
So how long have you been working in business, Jason? Will you tell us a bit about the roles that you've had there?
Sure. So I've been in business now, I think it was February 2018 I started, so about 2.5 years now. And as I say, the role that I took on first was it was a senior finance analyst role, and it was primarily involved in preparing financial statements and doing a lot of the accounting type stuff and looking after those aspects of the business. And then about a year ago now, I took on the finance manager role. So I'm working a lot more closely with colleagues across EMEA now, as well as with the States. I always work closely with colleagues in the States because we're a US headquartered group. But my role now is primarily looking after the accounting function in the UK, Ireland, and a number of other EMEA sites. So Dubai and Israel, primary responsibility for, and then I dip my toe in places like Spain and the Netherlands and those sort of places too. So virtually, of course, I haven't got the opportunity to travel there yet, but you know, we'll get there in time whenever we're all allowed to again. So yeah, that's been a role that I've been in now for about a year, and that the responsibilities in that are again, I'm primarily responsible for the external reporting, so you know, the financial statements and VAT returns, all those sort of things, and I look after the payroll functions for a number of our sites, and we have teams looking after that, and basically all the accounting type functions. So I mean, I guess it is a traditional accounting type role, you know, with a lot of other aspects. You know, I touch on a lot of aspects of the business that maybe when you're starting out, you don't think that an accountant will touch on. To be honest, you know, I get involved in a lot of stuff, and it's really interesting. I really enjoy it, I have to say.
Some people actually, just when you say that, Jason, consider the qualification, you know, as a business leadership qualification, and we view it as that as well. Would you agree? You know, you're talking there about some of the wider aspects of the role beyond just the numbers.
Yeah.
You know, is it a wider business leadership role you're doing?
I definitely think it is. I think one of the stats that I saw when I was doing the corporate governance masters was one of the essays I was researching was, I think, about 20% of FTSE 100 CEOs are accountants. Hopefully nobody will go and Google that because it could be wrong. But you know, quite a lot of business leaders are chartered accountants, and that background has really given them the right grounding for that, I think. And I think it is because of the fact that you touch on so many different areas of the business. You know, I work really closely with my legal colleagues, my HR colleagues. I work closer than I probably ever thought I would with the operations guys, you know, so I understand. Now, don't test me on any of this, but I understand how the business works, because you have to, you know, to prepare things like financial statements, you have to understand how the business is working and what sort of things you need to consider. So yeah, I think you get a really broad understanding of a business as an accountant. Absolutely.
And I know you're involved in a couple of other things in terms of charity work, and also then our Ulster Society. Would you tell me a bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So I would have been involved in the Ulster Society, or certainly attended things with the Ulster Society whenever I was a student. And I think if you're training in a big firm, you get that interaction with the Institute, and I thought it was great. I think the Institute, I mean, I'll tell you this obviously all the time, that the Institute's a great organisation and it's doing lots of great stuff. But whenever I moved into business, there was a period of time probably where that dropped away, because I was getting to understand my role, and you know, I'm based in the Northwest, a little bit further afield than where a lot of the stuff is. And then I thought, you know what, I really want to get back involved in this again. And I got involved in the Chartered Accountants and Business subcommittee. and I've been on that for, I don't even remember how long I've been on that for, but probably not long after I joined Seagate. And I've been on that for a while, and I've really enjoyed that, and given me the interaction with the institute and with my peers again. It's a really good opportunity to talk to peers.
And you had a really successful event recently on sustainability, which was brilliant. So congratulations on that.
Thanks very much. Yeah, and I recently joined the main committee, which has been a great opportunity, and I'm looking forward to getting stuck into that more. Actually, yeah, it's been really good to keep that interaction with the institute.
Yeah, no, connectivity, and I suppose that community feel is really important to the institute, which is great. And then the other thing is the charity you've been using set to give back in your wider community as well.
Yeah, so I have a trustee role in 2 charities, and a charity called Verbal in the Northwest, and a charity called Groundwork NI, which I've just recently taken on the role of chair of the Finance Personnel Committee. So I mean, those are really good roles. They're really interesting roles for me, and I feel like I'm using my qualification for something else as well. But I have been finding that the skill set that a chartered accountancy qualification gives you has been really useful. In those, as I say, you get a really good understanding of lots of aspects of business. And I've really enjoyed applying those and trying to help out those charities. And in terms of, it's been an interesting period with COVID, I guess, so it's sort of, you get thrown into the deep end there. But I think at that time, you need people like chartered accountants involved in those sort of businesses to really sort of try and get an understanding of what the impact of something like COVID is, and try and navigate through it. So yeah, I really enjoy that work, Sinead. I think it's something that I sort of picked up relatively recently and really enjoy doing,
Brilliant. Well, look, Jason, if somebody is considering this profession, what would you be saying to them? Do you have any nuggets to share with them, or any tips or advice?
I mean, firstly, obviously, I would highly recommend it to anybody that's considering it. I think it's a great qualification and a great career ultimately, and it's a really diverse career. I know people that have studied to be a chartered accountant that worked in a huge variety of industries, so it's certainly not limiting to the traditional accounting roles. There's people, I don't know, banking and leading businesses and on all those sorts of things, which the career gives you those opportunities. I mean, I guess in terms of advice for people that are interested in it, is to sort of go in with your ears open and listen and take on board everything, because I think the more you learn in those early stages of your career, the better for you. Yeah, so and that's a bit of advice somebody gave me recently, actually, when I changed my role, was to sort of try and be a sponge, if that's the right way to put it. Try and absorb all the information you can. So yeah, I'd highly recommend it as a career, and I think if people are interested in it as a career, there's a lot to learn. So by all means, take those opportunities when they're afforded to you, and they will be.
Great. I love that messaging, actually. So what a note to end on. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, and continued success in your own career journey as you go forward. And thank you everyone for tuning in. That's another episode done and dusted for today. And until next time, see you soon.
Thanks. Bye.